All right. Welcome everybody to our webinar today on effective security. What we're going to talk through is my experience and journey trying to improve cybersecurity programs during my time as a CIO, and then talk through the experience of finding challenges in the market, finding no viable solution, starting a company around it, and now looking at the way that a variety of organizations have now improved the effectiveness of their cybersecurity posture. My name is Snehal Antani. I am the co-founder and CEO here at Horizon3.ai. My background is I was a CIO at GE Capital. I then was the CTO at Splunk, took a break from industry, and have now started a cybersecurity company focused on autonomous pen testing. So we're going to talk about first is during my time as a CIO, what I described as my boardroom interrogation. And this is one of my first early presentations as a CIO and talking about our cybersecurity posture to the board. And this particular board member asking a very simple question. As I would present the various things that we were doing to reduce our attack surface or protect our crown jewels and so on, the simple question was, how do you know? And that board member went a little bit further and said, how do you know that we're actually secure? It sounds like we have to wait for a breach in order to prove or test our security posture. How do you know that our critical data and systems are truly protected? It sounds like we're waiting for a breach to find out. How do you know that we're fixing the right vulnerabilities? Because of the 100,000 vulnerabilities that were identified by our many tools, you only have the capacity to fix maybe 50 or 100. So how do you know that you've chosen the right 100 to go off and fix? And then finally, the question was around, we've spent millions of dollars on a variety of cybersecurity tools. How do we know that we purchased the right tools? How do we know that the tools that we've installed and deployed are properly configured and are actually effective? And this experience, this interrogation, was eye-opening for me because to my frustration, the answer was, I don't know. I didn't know the effectiveness of our security posture until we were actually breached. And by then it was too late. Up until that point, it was a bit of guesswork, wishful thinking, and hope. So from there, what that led me to do is understand a little bit more on the types of attacks that were occurring. And the attack that frightened me the most or got me the most aware of the need to understand the effectiveness of my posture was this concept of a credentialed attack. So in a credential attack, attackers don't have to hack in using 0 days like in the movies. They're able to often just log in with valid credentials that they found from some other source. For example, an attacker can go to LinkedIn and find all of the employee names for your organization. From there, they can figure out how to formulaically create your user ID for, say, your email service. It might be your last name, first initial @companyname.com. And from there, all it takes is one individual to have reused their Netflix personal password for their corporate email, or for somebody to use company name 1234 or some other weak credential that made it through the policy, or reuse credential to allow the attacker to start to credential spray, credentialed stuff, and use other types of techniques to gain access to external systems and services. And from there, those attackers end up in this natural cycle of harvesting credentials, combining together with misconfigurations and other dangerous defaults to find more privileged user IDs like your AWS tokens and secrets, laterally move, take advantage of misconfigurations in the backend to become a domain administrator on the network. And when you look at the top 10 vulnerabilities found in an infrastructure pen test, most of them, I think 6 or 7 out of 10, are not CVEs. They are problems like misconfigurations, dangerous defaults, and credential reuse. And so attackers didn't have to take advantage of the latest CVEs that were reported on the newswire or some custom malware that was developed. Oftentimes, they were able to attack in these types of attack chains without the use of CVEs or malware. And to my question to my security team was, how quickly can we actually detect these types of attacks? And this is the type of attack that underpins most ransomware attacks today. And then back to the question I was asked in the board, which is, how do we know? Like, how do we know we can actually detect this? From there, I started to rethink the way that I manage cybersecurity. So what I found is the bulk of my investment and effort in cybersecurity was on the reactive side of the line. So what we assume is that the attacker is going to gain some initial access, and then all of the security tools and techniques that we have in place swarm to stifle that attack. Where I've got logging tools to try to detect beacons or catch lateral movements or detect exfil. I've got managed detection and response or endpoint protection and so on that are going to stifle that initial access, or basically the attacker has to have already come in. And then if they are successful, then what can I do using SOAR type tools to disrupt the kill chain? And then how do I set the conditions to effectively conduct forensics? But for me, 95 to 99% of my effort was on the reactive side. And what I wanted to do was find and fix those attack vectors or those attack paths before criminals exploit them. I wanted to start to balance my investment and effort to not just be reactive, but to proactively find new exploitable attack vectors, go off and properly fix them, and actually prioritize those issues based on impact, verify those issues have actually been remediated, and verify that my controls are effective, and then be able to accurately report my posture, not only today, but my posture over time to my leadership, to my board, and to my regulators. And my initial thought was the use of continuous pen testing as the mechanism to proactively find and fix those attack vectors. And in my vision, what I wanted to do back when I was a CIO was I didn't have to want to install more agents. I was tired of installing credentialed agents across my environment. As we saw through the SolarWinds attack, credentialed agents are actually a pretty serious attack surface for attackers to exploit. I didn't want to have my teams develop custom scripts because I could barely tread water as a security organization. Carving off a bunch of security analysts to go develop attack scripts just wasn't feasible. I didn't have the skills or the time or the engineering capacity. And I was tired of constantly hiring consultants that would show up, poke my team in the eye, leave behind a PDF report, and then disappear. And so what I wanted to try to do was own and internally drive this continuous security assessment posture and approach. As I did that, what I tried to do in my organization was set up the following. Set up a red team that's able to continuously assess my security posture. Set up the blue team whose sole job was to fix those problems. So these were IT administrators, network engineers, security tool owners, and admins that were focused on taking input from the red team and fixing them. And what I wanted to do was fiercely protect my security operations center to just focus on defending the enterprise, because that in itself is a very hard job. And what you think about is the SOC ends up being maniacally focused right of breach, whereas the red and the blue teams are maniacally focused left of breach. And that's how I tried to organize. When I first did this a few years ago, I failed miserably. And I failed miserably because as I tried to assess my security posture, I ended up with this fundamental reality. And the reality is that I had a variety of tools that needed to go off and do the assessment. I used a mix of vulnerability scanners. I used a mix of consultants, a mix of breach and attack simulation tools like Veridin and so on. And as I used these various tools, every one of them showed me a different set of problems that were critical. And I ended up with this real difficult challenge of trying to prioritize what to fix and what not to fix. And to be honest, this made my problem worse because the hardest part of my job then became, what do I not fix? And how do I prove why I shouldn't fix it in a way that if we are breached and if that was something that was used in the attack chain, I've got some form of evidence that I wasn't being irresponsible as a corporate officer. And from there, as we started to remediate problems, I would do the remediation, the teams would, and maybe they were only partially remediated. And so when we run the assessment again, we would end up in this fight between the IT team that says they've swore they fixed that problem, and the security assessment team saying, no, look, it's still vulnerable and it's still exploitable. And then finally, as I tried to provide reports to the board, it became very frustrating because it became even harder to be able to effectively communicate. And where I was let down is that there was no simple, accurate, easy way to assess my security posture. Vulnerability scanners are noisy, and being vulnerable doesn't mean I'm exploitable. If I get 100,000 findings from a vulnerability scanner, maybe 5 or 10 can actually be exploited that leads to a critical impact. So sifting through the noise to fix the vulnerabilities that mattered became a very daunting task. As I paid those consultants to come in, what they would give me was an incomplete snapshot. They could only assess a narrow slice of my environment because of time and money. And as a result, they would only be able to help me find problems in a certain segment of my environment. As I went off to fix them, I wasn't able to re-engage those consultants to verify. I started using security risk management tools to do the reporting. And what happened there is it was garbage in and garbage out. And then finally, with those Greek attack and simulation tools, those burdened me to install those agents, write those fake scripting tests. And once again, this reality became super frustrating. But what this created for me was an opportunity. And that opportunity was to actually start a company focused on finding and fixing those exploitable attack vectors before criminals could exploit them. So what I did after that was found an outstanding co-founder in Tony, and he and I started Horizon 3. And our background, right, from my background in industry and Tony's background from the military and the special operations community, we brought a significant amount of offensive and defensive cyber expertise to the table. And what we recognized was that there was no way to verify the effectiveness of my security posture through our existing tools and techniques. And so what I thought was, well, how do I take the best of these capabilities, which in vulnerability scanning is a tremendous amount of coverage, with pen testing, it's the ability to chain together complex steps in an attack chain. And then with breach and attack simulation, this idea of continuous assessment. Now, those are the good parts of those categories. But then how do I shed all of the bad stuff that was frustrating me? The inability to focus on what's exploitable and sift through the noise that are vulnerabilities, the ability to maximize coverage in an end-to-end pen test, and the ability to continuously assess my environment without adding to my attack surface. And what we recognized was this fundamental shift from manual pen testing to crowdsourced pen testing to automated pen testing to this new world of autonomous pen testing. And with autonomous pen testing, there are no consultants, there are no agents, there are no custom scripts. And it's this idea of using autonomous pen testing to continuously find those chained exploitable vulnerabilities, fix problems that truly matter, verify my posture, and accurately report to the board and regulators. And a really concrete example is when running an autonomous pen test against a financial institution. That autonomous pen test, which started as an unauthenticated user on the network, was able to become a domain administrator in 7 minutes and 19 seconds. And when you become a domain administrator, you have keys to the kingdom. You can lock out all of your employees. You can change all the network configurations. You can tear down all of your clouds, destroy all of your data. At that point, you're basically screwed as an organization. And what makes ransomware, for instance, so effective is their ability to quickly become domain admin. Once again, in 7 minutes and 19 seconds, can your security operations center accurately detect, stifle, and prevent that domain compromise from occurring? The challenge with this bank is in 7 minutes and 19 seconds, the autonomous pen test became a domain admin, and they had every Gucci cybersecurity tool you could imagine. The best SIM, the best EDR, the best talent and workflows and processes and so on, yet not a single security alert was triggered within their SOC. And this goes back to the point that we don't have a security tools problem anymore in cybersecurity. What we have is a security effectiveness problem, making sure that we are truly effective in our security posture, that we're alerting on the right issues, we're logging the right data, and we're proactively finding and fixing those problems. So from this experience, I thought about, well, what does an attack chain or an attack path actually look like? And when you think about this problem of going from an unauthenticated user to domain admin on the network, and this is a deep dive of that 7 minute and 19 second attack, what happened was from the start of the pen test, the autonomous pen testing agent, Node 0 is what we call it in Horizon 3, was able to turn on a tool called Responder, which is able to take advantage of misconfigurations in the DNS of your environment. And what that is able to do was grab a user ID in this domain with this hash. And that's just a misconfiguration. And then because this particular company had a weak password, for that user ID, we were able to automatically take that hash and crack it to be the clear text. And then from there, that hash happened to be the hash of a domain administrator. And we were able to log in to the domain controller with that user ID that we collected, with that password we were able to crack, and become domain admin on the network. And once again, from there, we had keys to the kingdom. Not a single human was involved in this attack. Not a single custom script was written for this attack. This attack used the exact same techniques and tactics as ransomware or any other prolific attack vector or attack organization that you see in the market today. But then the question is, so what? So what do I do about this? And this is where the fix comes into play. What we have here is the path, the full end-to-end attack chain, and the proof of every step in that attack chain along the way, and the impact, which is domain admin. And now what we need is to clearly articulate to the fixers what to do about it. And that's when you start to zoom in and say, well, to stifle this attack, there are two fundamental problems to go clean up. The first is you have a weak and default credentialed problem. For that particular user, AJ Smith, they had very weak passwords, but most likely you have a weak password policy across the organization. And AJ Smith is not going to be the only person whose password will be able to get cracked automatically through a hash cracking rig. So you have to go clean up your weaker default credentials policy that you have. And the second problem is a misconfiguration in LLM&R, where what you want to do is turn off your multicast name resolution setting under your local computer policy. And what that'll do is prevent hashes from being passed in the clear across the wire to begin with. So what you have is path. This is the exact attack path that led to the domain compromise. Proof, there is no doubt that this was exploitable along the way. So you no longer have to convince the IT team that this is a problem. The proof is right there in the screenshots. Impact, domain admin or domain compromise is keys to the kingdom. That's a big deal. And then what to do about it. And being able to clearly articulate this is an exploitable issue became an X factor. And this was what I wish I had during my experience as a CIO, which didn't exist, back to the reality that I faced. And then using that experience to figure out how to autonomously assess my environment so I can proactively fix my problems. From there, what you look at is examples within customers. So one of our global manufacturing customers, a customer that has 37 global data centers, they started to engage with us at Horizon 3 because of the following. The first is they were paying $35,000 per pen test to consultants. And those consultants would show up, do their narrowly scoped assessment, leave behind a PDF, embarrass your team, and then disappear until you paid them again to show up. Despite spending that money on consultants, they were breached and their CISO was fired. And so with us, their motivation after looking at this and assessing and identifying what we discovered as real exploitable attack vectors, they went from cold email to deal close in 8 weeks. When you look at their adoption, fast forward 12 months later now as a customer, they shifted from running a couple of pen tests a year to running 16 pen tests per month. Once again, no consultants involved, no agents to install, no custom scripts to write. And what this allows them to do is create a sparring partner for their security operations center. So what they're doing is every time they run a pen test, they're looking in the SOC to figure out what alerts were triggered, what alerts were not triggered and why, and what blind spots do we have in our alerting and monitoring, and how do we use that experience to further tune our security tools in order to improve our effectiveness. The other key use case is that they're network engineers. These are not professional pen testers or ethical hackers in any way. They are running self-service pen tests against the network and against their administrative domains. And what's happened is they've become security superheroes, where a network engineer in 3 clicks has become an ethical hacker with 20 years of experience through the use of the network engineer's domain expertise, plus the autonomous pen testing capabilities that they're able to take advantage of. What this has created is the behavior of the red team running the autonomous pen test, that is node 0, to find problems, the blue team going off and fixing the specific issues that enabled a critical impact. Once again, misconfigured LLM&R, weaker default credentials or any other issue like that. And then the red team rerunning that autonomous pen test to verify that the problem has been remediated. And what you end up in is this find, fix, verify loop where you're continuously finding and fixing the problems that are truly exploitable. And what that creates are the cultural conditions for purple teaming, where red and blue are working together as an integrated team versus as adversarial units poking each other in the eye. And purple teaming it's not a tool. It's not really an outcome necessarily. It's a cultural mindset of red and blue working together. And what that cultural mindset has created is this pretty profound impact. What I aspired to do as a CIO, which failed to, but what I've now set the conditions to do through the startup that is Horizon 3, which is by continuously finding, fixing, and verifying, this organization was able to cut the number of security weaknesses per host by 95% over time. And what you'll see is the more pen tests they ran early, the more problems they found. But eventually they got this purple team culture in place where they dramatically reduced in that orange line from December 20 and beyond, they dramatically reduced the amount of weaknesses per host. The second outcome for them was dramatically accelerating their mean time to resolution, which is as the red team found a problem, as they built the right relationship with the blue team, they were able to rapidly fix that security weakness that was identified, that LLMNR misconfig, for instance, or rapidly improve the logs they were ingesting into Splunk, for instance, or some other security tool in order to improve their detection time within the SOC. And because they didn't have to deal with procurement, whitelisting, or any of the other pre-pen test setup or post-pen setup analysis, they're able to save 600 plus person hours per pen test as they executed in this manner. And so what this goes back to is the original vision that I had around the red and the blue team working together to proactively fix. Because in that vision, there are now three emerging use cases. One, the role of autonomous pen testing as that sparring partner, where once again, Node Zero could gain domain admin in 7 minutes and didn't trigger any SOC alerts. That's a problem. And now you've got a sparring partner to understand how to improve the effectiveness of your SOC. The second key use case becomes those IT administrators, those network engineers, those security tool administrators that are empowered as fixers to quickly and proactively find, fix, and verify their security weaknesses and logging blind spots. And then finally, for those few organizations that have their own in-house ethical hacking team, this becomes a force multiplier because those ethical hackers can use the autonomous tools to knock out all the low-hanging fruit so that those humans can focus on the really hard exploitable issues. And now you've set the conditions for human-machine teaming for security testing and assessments. And now when you look at that team structure and as you revisit it, that red team is able to find those exploitable attack paths, and hopefully they're triggering your security alerts. You want them to test your network segmentation. If they could freely laterally move, that means, and you thought you had the segmentation in place, you want the red team to identify that through autonomous pen testing and other techniques so that you can fix it before the bad guys take advantage. You want them to trigger security alerts so that you can see what didn't trigger and recognize that you've got logging blind spots. You want the blue team to be maniacally focused on taking the output from the red team in a collaborative manner and quickly fixing the problems that were identified. And what you want to create is this really tight loop between the red team and the blue team, powered by this autonomous pen testing capability in order to set that purple team culture. And meanwhile, in parallel, you want to fiercely protect the time of the security operations center so that they can focus on defending the enterprise. And what I'll leave you with is this idea of finding and fixing what matters. And for those that are interested in identifying and verifying their security effectiveness, there's a low effort way to go off and do that with us. And we look forward to carrying on and continuing the conversation. But the way to engage is step one, treat this as the overview for how to use autonomous pen testing and the role it plays in your organization. Step two is we're big believers in letting our results do the talking. So for free, go off and run an autonomous pen test using Node Zero, and you will find a bunch of issues. Step 3 is go off and fix them. Once again, engage the blue team to fix those issues. And then in step 4, you're going to rerun that autonomous pen test to verify those problems have been fixed. And when our customers and prospects hit this find, fix, verify cycle, they, at 100% win rate, become lifelong customers of ours. And there's no downside, right? If you run us to find something, then you fix it and you verify it and go tell your boss that you proactively solved the problem. And if you run the autonomous pen test and you find nothing, congratulations, you know for sure your controls are working well. Go off and tell your boss and let you know that things are good to go. So here are some links to go off and do a follow-up here. You can go schedule a demo, you can schedule a free trial, you can reach out to us anytime. What I'll do is leave it open in the last 5 minutes here for any questions that are from the audience. And once again, I appreciate the time and thank you.